Welcome back. More women were hardest hit by Covid-19. The Oxfam report claims that the pandemic cost women over $800 billion in lost income last year. It says women are overrepresented in low-paid sectors and the majority of them work in informal employment. So to discuss this matter further, we're joined now by Nthabiseng Moleko from Stellenbosch University's Business School. Nthabiseng, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I mean, these statistics are absolutely alarming. Just how much of a harsh impact has the Covid-19 pandemic had on women as well as their jobs?
So thank you so much for having me, and a very good morning to you. The background before COVID, I think we must just lay that out, is that we know that women tend to earn less, have fewer savings, and they have less access to social protection. Women are also disproportionately more in the informal economy and are burdened with unpaid care and domestic work. So you find that before COVID, these are some of the conditions that women worked within across the world and not only in South Africa. Now, what happened with the COVID effect was that almost 140 million full-time jobs were lost due to the COVID effect, the lockdown effect. And what happened was that women's employment was at a higher level of risk. It's measured at 19% more than men. We found in South Africa there's a 2% average higher level of unemployment across women in all sectors. And we find also that women are overrepresented in many industries that are hard hit by COVID. So you'll find that in entertainment and service and food and retail, 40% of these sectors actually employ more women than men. And so these are hard hit by lockdown. And so the employment effect and the unemployment effect is further felt. In South Africa, the National Income Dynamic Study, the NID survey, showed that in the first stage of COVID, 2 million people, 66% of job losses were accounted for by women, particularly women who were poor or in the lower income decile. So you're finding that the severity of effect of COVID is definitely, from a statistical perspective, showing that it's hardest hit and hitting hard on women, particularly in the lower income deciles, and particularly those households that are entering or in the informal sector.
Yeah, I mean, the issue around women in precarious sectors of industry is not only a South African matter, but it's actually a global matter as well. But I guess the question is, why does it continue to persist? Why do we still have women concentrated in this sector of industry as opposed to being, widely spread across all sectors of industry? Unless we're saying that women were not designed to do certain jobs, which I truly believe is not true. Why do we still have this problem?
So we have the effect of the disproportionate, the gender disparities in the economy. You will find that the STEM-related sectors, your sciences, technology, engineering, those sectors that are more machinery built, are generally, you find, lower level of female representation. And as more senior as you go, and these are the discriminatory effects of our labor market system, you find fewer women, particularly in decision-making positions. You'll also find that the entry into these, as women enter these jobs, there is what we call a gender wage pay gap. So the discriminatory effect, irrespective of the level of education, again, you're finding that the effect of the discriminatory labor market results in South Africa almost 30 to 35% difference in wages, irrespective of level of education. So you may have the same level of education, but the disparities in income persist. These speak to the determinants and some of the discriminatory factors in the labor market. So these need to be dealt with decisively so that not only across subsectors we see more women through career planning, to ensuring that labor and legislation deal with transparency issues on gender wage gap, but also to ensuring that we see the equivalent, the same proportion of women in some of these harder sectors or more manufacturing inclined sectors and not just the services sectors. And I think it's a discriminatory issue that is historical in the labor market, and it's across the globe. It's not just in South Africa.
Well, in South Africa, we keep speaking about this economic recovery plan and about how the economy needs to get back on its feet again. How does the economy get back on its feet if such a significant proportion of women have been actually placed off the job market? And these jobs that they've lost are jobs that were really vulnerable, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic. I really have to ask the question around economic recovery within the next 2 to 3 years. Is that even possible at this stage?
Listen, the fallout has been severe for those who are most vulnerable. The women, the youth, the migrant workers, those who are in the youth population. As we know in South Africa, up to 60% of unemployment within the youth between 15 to 24 persists. So those who have escaped poverty in the last 2, 3, 4 years have actually now, as a result of COVID, fallen back into poverty. This is a fact. The second thing is that we've got a disproportionate number of households who are in the informal employment sector, who are already impoverished. As a result of lockdown, this has worsened their plight because there was not necessarily sufficient social support for those who are in the informal sector. You saw that majority of support and support services, social support, COVID relief was primarily to the formal sector. I think what, Faith, you're talking about in terms of what can we do to recover. Listen, there are things we can still do. We've got to stimulate our economy. We've got to look at how we use our surpluses. And I'll always say this, the domestic surpluses persist. We've got to reinvest in crowded investment towards our manufacturing value add, our secondary sectors. You recover quicker when you deal with productivity. You've got to look at how your economic strategy is not speaking to decisively employment and labor absorption. So you've got to have alternative mechanisms to enhance this productivity. And I think the third thing we've got to look at is how do we reform our value chain and distribution channels to encourage new entrants, to ensure that those who are at the lower level of the food chain, particularly in the economic services, are actually bought in. We cannot have oligopolies, monopolies controlling 22 subsectors in South Africa's economy right now, and we think that we're going to reform the economy. So I think the economic recovery plan, beyond just the semantics, we've got to look at how we actually enhancing productivity sufficiently, quickly, and we need to do it urgently. I think the areas where we need to focus on are the urban, or the non-urban areas, the areas where unemployment is really at a critical level, over 50%, in the Eastern Cape, 51%, Mpumalanga, KZN, and other provinces, the Free State, over 40% unemployment. We're talking the expanded definition. We have to decisively deal with the fundamental issues of the structure of the economy, and that means we've got to look at enhancing our secondary production, our secondary sector, enhancing productivity, and using all of our financial systems, our financial support, and our infrastructure together to decisively deal with
we have to leave it there.
things.
I got you completely. Thank you so much for that one. And Nthabiseng Moleko giving us the matter on that. Well, May Day celebration.